y'all. My name is Violet, and I've been interviewing my dad about his 1997 Everest summit climb with the Nova expedition. He was on this climb with climbers like Ed Viesturs, David Brashears, and a bunch of other notable guys. Even though this was 30 years later, I wanted to ask him about the climb and share that with the internet because I feel like there's a lot of burning questions that aren't necessarily answered. So I created this series, My Dad Climbed Everest and I Have Questions. I originally made it for TikTok, hence the reason it's formatted the way it is, but these are basically compilations of those videos. So I suggest you go look at my TikTok if you want to see them in their original form. Otherwise, stay tuned for these compilations. And in today's video, we are covering these topics. So first, he tells us how Mount Everest climbers communicated with home in the 1990s, because he went in 1991 and 1997. Then he talks about how his Nova expedition was one of the first to give live updates on an Everest climb to the world. There was actually like a live blog with updates for people to check all over the world while he was there. And then because of this Nova climb, he was kind of a local celebrity when he came home, so I asked him about that and how it felt. Then he tells us about how his pictures were used to promo that Everest film, which was pretty cool, and his opinion on vloggers nowadays on Everest, and the biggest perk he experienced from summiting Mount Everest. So I hope you enjoy.
People didn't know if you were summiting, if you were alive or dead until somebody came back. You came back. In 91, when I went to Everest for the first time, we had a satellite phone, and I would call home, I think in 91, every 2 to 3 weeks, and it was a real bad connection and talk for just a minute or two. And my mom and dad really didn't know what the heck was going on in 91. There was no communication, and that's how it used to be in the old days. When you go on these expeditions, you'd leave the States, the communication was really bad. My mom and dad really didn't know in 91, for weeks they wouldn't hear from me. And I remember I sent a fax from Kathmandu in 1991 to my work office to tell my mom and dad that, hey, I'm safe and sound, I'm back in Kathmandu, and I'll be home on such and such date. And that's kind of how we communicated back then. It was not instantaneous. A lot of times it didn't work, and a lot of times when you called people on satellite phones, it was hard to understand. We had satellite phones in 97 and 91, but we had internet access, so we were able to, this is a new thing in 97, especially for being on a mountain in a remote location. It was just such an interesting thing to have live feed coming in, emails coming in, and reading them, and then emailing back to somebody to answer their question. So during the climb, Nova was running a live webcast. Every day on their website, they would update everybody and what we were doing that day. They'd have pictures and things like that, and they'd have quick quotes from the climbers, Ed and I and Dave and Guy and Pete. People had the opportunity to email us back and ask questions, and a lot of people from Indiana, my hometown of Indianapolis, emailed and had a lot of questions. And it was quite funny because in the beginning of the expedition, after we do a rotation, like for a week or a week and a half, we'd come back down to base camp to rest, and we'd go over to the Nova tent and have to start typing out responses to questions. But the Nova people in the tent started laughing because it would take me so long at altitude to type out questions, and so they basically just took over the responses. I'd come in and they'd read off the question, and I'd verbally respond, and then they would type it within minutes and kind of clean up my answer a little bit and send it out. A lot of friends would email in. It was kind of nice to hear from high school friends and college friends and work people. It's pretty cool. It was Nova did a wonderful job with it. The technology worked. They spent a lot of time on it. Pretty cool because people in Indiana, especially my mom and dad, kind of knew what was going on in real time. Probably did over 1,000 interviews and slideshows and all that stuff. How did it feel when I came back from the Everest climb in '97 after summiting? I think people were really intrigued with the NOVA website and the news that was coming out from the expedition, because it was kind of real-time news. And like we discussed earlier, that was new. I think a lot of people, especially in Indiana where I'm from, were just enamored with it and thought it was pretty cool. I didn't realize how many people were watching the NOVA website and the news about our climb until I basically got back in Indianapolis, and I was kind of shocked to tell you the truth. I mean, it was kind of overwhelming. I wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't really ready for it, to come back and have all these people want to talk to me and do interviews and go on TV and talk about the climb. It took me some time to kind of get my rhythm going and how to talk to people about the climb, and I was still emotionally drained from the near-death experience up there and summiting and everything. I was still trying to process everything. Probably took me almost a year to kind of get my act together. Did quite a bit of interviews. I did a lot of radio and TV stuff, but I also did a lot of slideshows for corporate companies in the Midwest, and I also talked to a lot of schools and a lot of Boy Scout troops. And those were a lot of fun, talking to kids. Photography, as all my friends know and Violet knows, is not my strong point. I don't take a lot of pictures, even with an iPhone. And back in '91 and '97, I just had a little Instamatic camera. I think it was a Kodak, and it's just automatic. I'd point and shoot. And in '97, Nova gave us film, which we had to use. And we also had to sign a release that they got all the photos, and then they developed the photos and send them all to me, but they would pick out what they wanted. The funny thing about that is, between Brashears and Ed and Guy Cotter and Pete, those guys have spent a lot of time in the mountains, especially with photography. And I was just taking pictures, really wasn't looking at backgrounds or anything and colors. But the funny thing about Nova is they used my pictures on the VCR tape on the covers. There was a sunrise picture they used, and they also used a picture of me on the summit. I think Ed took that picture with my camera. So they had multiple pictures that they published that I had taken, which was kind of the running joke, I thought, with the group. What's my opinion on people blogging Everest expeditions? I'll be upfront with you. I really I don't follow any of it anymore. Kind of comical a little bit, maybe, but also, it's how these climbers get this information out on their climb. I think it's okay. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I'm a pretty private person. It's not like I'm on my phone all the time looking at what climbers are doing or anything like that. Yeah, I think the Nova people kind of. I mean, it was the first time that you could blog live, and people in the States or Indianapolis kind of knew what was going on within hours of it happening, and that was a new phenomena back in '97. And I go back to my '91 climb. Basically, when I left the U.S., there was hardly any news on our climb in 1991. Every once in a while, some nuggets would trickle out. Quite frankly, back then we had letters. I was writing letters and mailing it back to Indy, and I was getting letters from Indy every once in a while from mail that was mailed to Kathmandu. Then it was getting choppered in or dropped in from a helicopter or on a yak caravan coming into base camp. Everything is always changing. It's always evolving, and you got to get used to the change. And some of it's good and some of it's bad. I'm kind of indifferent to it all, to tell you the truth. The coolest thing is, and I think the only notoriety I really enjoyed was getting a card from a restaurant bar in Kathmandu called the Rum Doodle, and all the summiters on Everest they used to get free meals at this bar called the Rum Doodle, and you get this little card that had a picture and the date you summited. I went there, I think I got that in like 2004 or so. I went back on a trek, and I was with Ed Viesters and Veka Guffinson at Rum Doodle, and we got our cards back then. And We got a free meal out of it. And so whenever I'd go back to Kathmandu for 2015, I'd show my card at the Rum Doodle and get a free meal. So that's kind of the only real big free benefit I ever got from climbing Everest.